Today's demonstration will cover two main financing flows, being payables finance and receivables finance. We will also see a lot of other functionality, such as customer onboarding, counterparty management, uploading of invoices, and the manual and automated financing and settlement of these invoices. The first part of the demonstration will be very much focused on Eximbills Enterprise, which is our flagship back-office processing engine. As we move into the second part of the demo, you will see a lot more interaction between Customer Enterprise, which is our customer portal, and Eximbills Enterprise. We will now start the demonstration, and as a first step, we will be adding an existing bank customer to a new payables financing program using the sign agreement function here in Eximbills Enterprise. The first thing we will enter is the business type. So for this part of the demonstration, we want payables finance. We will select that and then enter the anchor customer ID, which will retrieve the details of the customer that is already existing, being AdamTest0923. We will now select their account and we will specify a limit for this customer. Once we have allocated the limit, we can then go and fill in an agreement document number. And this is basically a reference to an original contract or document if there is one in place. Once we have filled this out, we will then proceed to start adding this anchor customer's counterparty. Just to add a bit of detail on the UI here, all of the fields that have a blue underline are mandatory fields, all of the fields that are light grey are system populated, and all of the fields that are white are optional. You will also notice next to the tab names on the left that there are two small icons, one being a pie shape and the other being a tick. As you complete these tabs, the pie will get fuller and fuller, and once they are fully complete, they will be ticked, which is an easy way to identify the current status of one of these tabs. Now we will continue by adding this anchor customer's counterparties. So we will select add. Now we will fill in a customer registration number for the counterparty. We will use AdamTest002. Next we will fill out the actual name of the counterparty. And once we have that done, we will then select if the customer is already a bank customer or if they're a CE customer. One interesting feature that is worth mentioning here is that if the customer is already a bank customer but does not transact on our portal, if we set this flag to yes, it will actually trigger a process that will create access for this customer on Customer Enterprise. I'll just clear this prompt and then set the account number for the customer. You can see they've also been assigned the limit, which is actually the full anchor parties limit. This can be edited if required. So we'll save that. Now that the counterparty details have been added, we will set up some validation rules for the anchor customer. We have set them as an acknowledged customer, which means that any invoices submitted by this customer will be financed without the need for bank approval. We will now enable auto financing and automatic settlement for this anchor customer. And you can see that the fields being funding cutoff days, minimum financing amount, and maximum financing amount have all become mandatory. So we will set the funding cutoff days to 5, the minimum financing amount to 1,000, and the maximum financing amount to 20,000. This tab is now complete. As you can see, we have a tick on the left, so we will move on to the pricing tab. In this tab, we will set the profit rate type to fixed, the base interest rate, and we will also set the invoice max financing percentage. You can also set the charge frequency and who the charges are to be paid by, the anchor or the counterparty. In this case, we selected the anchor. There are a number of other commissions and rates that can also be set here, but for now, given we've completed all of the mandatory fields, we will keep moving. So at this stage, we can see on the left that all the tabs are complete and that we have added all the details for both the anchor customer and their counterparty. So we will now go ahead and confirm this transaction. In a real life scenario, there may now be a supervisor release required, but in the interest of the demonstration and keeping things clear, concise and brief, I will not be showing any of the supervisor release steps today. So at this point, we now have our anchor customer set up and our counterparty onboarded. So we will just go and take a quick look at the limit information to make sure that is all good. We will do that by doing a dynamic inquiry by customer. We will then paste in the customer name, AdamTest0923, hit filter. Now we can see the limit details associated with the anchor customer. And we can see under the anchor customer, there is also another limit, and this is the counterparty limit that we set up. And as I mentioned earlier, we have assigned the anchor party's full limit to this singular counterparty, but in a real life scenario, if there were multiple counterparties, you could assign each counterparty an individual limit as long as it did not exceed the parent limit of the anchor customer. Now that we have verified the anchor party and counterparty's limit details, we will now begin the invoice upload, which will start off the payables finance transaction flow. The invoice format we will be uploading today is an Excel format that you can see on your screen. At the top of the screen, you will see there are a number of details pertaining to the anchor customer, and at the bottom of the screen is a combination of the counterparty details and the invoice data. So working from left to right, you will see that there is the SBR reference. SBR, which is short for seller-buyer relationship, obviously the relationship between the anchor party and the counterparty, which was created at the sign agreement function. Following that, you can see the counterparty name. Then we can see that there is a document number, which is the invoice number, the invoice currency, the amount, the document date, the value date, and the due date, which is the 30th of September. So there is 4 invoices that are being uploaded, and each invoice is valued at $3,000, $5,000, $6,000, and $7,000 respectively, which is a total amount of $21,000 US. So we will now jump back into EE and we will proceed to upload this invoice. To upload this invoice, we go to the Upload File function and we select the message type to invoice. We then select Choose File. We navigate and we select the Excel file that we were just looking at. Once we select that and click Open, we can now confirm this, and it is uploaded. An interesting point about this Excel file that we are uploading is that although for today's demonstration we are only uploading 4 invoices, in a real-life business scenario this could be hundreds if not thousands of invoices. So in essence, it is a very efficient way of getting a lot of invoice data into the application in a single step. Additionally, it is worth noting that we can also support the upload of other formats such as XML, as well as the capture of the invoice data through the application screens. And we can also receive invoice data via open APIs from corporate ERP systems. So we will now go and check on the status of the invoices that we have uploaded to the Inquire Invoice function. We will then filter by SBR reference. We will paste that, select filter. And here we can see the 4 invoices that we just uploaded. And we can see that the document status is active, which essentially means that there is no approval required. They are simply waiting to be picked up by a background batch process that will execute the auto financing. If we had not created this customer as an acknowledged customer at the sign agreement function, there would now be an approval step required by the bank. We can also select an invoice and view the finer details if we wish. Here we can see a little bit more detail. So if we wait just a little bit of time for these invoices to be picked up by the batch process, we'll just go back to the main menu. And now we will go back into the same function again, being Inquire Invoice. And we will once again filter by the SBR reference. We'll paste that in, select filter. And now we can see that the 4 invoices have successfully been financed. And again, we can view the details, but now we can navigate down to the Invoice Financing Details tab. So this will show the amount less the charges, interest, etc., and the amount that has been financed to the supplier in this case. There are also some standard reports that we can take a look at. These are obviously configurable, but there are some included here. So we will just go to the SCF program and go down to the Reports function. And we will open up the Payables Finance Invoice Financing End of Day report. And then we will paste in the buyer or the anchor party's name, being Adam Test 0923. And here we can see a report on all of the invoices financed. We can see the invoice amount and also the finance amount as well. So that's just a glimpse at some of the reports that are available. And we will now go back to the main menu and we will close out this section of the demonstration by showing you the auto settlement of the invoices that have been financed. Now, the way in which we will simulate the automatic settlement of these invoices is we will essentially perform time travel by changing the system date from today's date, which is the 23rd, to the 30th of September because that is the due date of the invoices. So once we switch the system date to the 30th of September, this will mean that the batch job will be running in the background. It will then pick up the invoices that are due to be settled on that date, which are the 4 invoices that we uploaded, and they will then be automatically settled. Obviously, in a real life scenario, you will not see this happen. Time will just pass, and on the day that they need to be settled, the system will handle it automatically. So this has now been completed. We are now essentially 7 days ahead of where we were. So we can now go to the invoice inquire function again, and we will actually search by buyer name this time, being AdamTest0923. And here we can see that the invoices are now all settled, and this has all been done automatically without any user intervention. And again, we can expand and see the details further, such as the payment amount, the principal paid, etc. So that should conclude the first part of today's demonstration. Just to recap quickly, the first thing we did was we added an existing bank customer to a new payables finance program. We then added their counterparty, then uploaded an invoice and viewed the invoice being automatically financed and subsequently automatically settled. We will now proceed with the second part of today's demonstration, which will focus on a receivables finance or receivables discounting process flow. There will be a lot more interaction from customer enterprise in this part of the demonstration. This demonstration uses our standard baseline version of customer enterprise, and it is worth noting that when it comes to a project implementation, the look and feel can be customized and enhanced in line with the bank's requirements. A key distinction in the flow of this part of the demonstration is that we will actually do the counterparty onboarding from customer enterprise versus Eximbills enterprise, which we showed earlier. So once again, we will start off by going to the sign agreement function. This time we will set the business type to receivables discounting, aka receivables finance. We will select the customer ID. It's the same anchor customer. We will again select their account number. And once again, we will set them a limit, this time for receivables discounting. The last time we did it for payables financing. We will then again set an agreement document number, and we will move on to the validation rules. Once again, we will set them as an acknowledged customer, but this time we will set automatic finance to no and automatic settlement to no, so that we can show you the manual settlement and financing functions. We will also set the need buyer approval flag to yes. What this flag does is it calls for approval from the buyer for the invoices that have been uploaded by the supplier. This obviously may be impacted by transaction criteria such as disclosed or non-disclosed, and also the recourse details. Now we can see that we have completed our main and validation rules tab. We can move on to the pricing tab. So once again, we will set the interest rates, the profit rate types, the invoice maximum financing percentage, the charge frequency, and who the charges are to be paid by. Now this tab is complete. We can go and confirm the transaction as well as copy the reference number for future use. We will now log into Customer Enterprise as the anchor customer, who in this case, being Receivables Finance, is the supplier. Once we are logged into Customer Enterprise, we can then go and view the agreement that was created in Eximbills Enterprise. We can also see the agreement that we created earlier for Payables Finance. For now, we will focus on this, which is the Receivables Finance agreement, which we had just created back over in the Eximbills Enterprise sign agreement function. So if we scroll down through this, we can see all of the details that we added from our main tab, our validation rules, and our pricing details. So once we cancel out of that, we can then move on to uploading the counterparties. We will use an Excel format to upload these counterparties. At the top of this Excel file, you will see there's details pertaining to the main customer or the anchor customer, being AdamTest0923. And the bottom section then contains details of the counterparty that we wish to add. You will see there are a number of different fields, such as street name, city, province, country code, mail address, contact name, contact email address, as well as the telephone number, the applied limit currency, and the applied limit amount being $300,000 US. Although here for demonstration purposes we are just uploading one counterparty, in a real life business scenario this could be hundreds if not thousands of counterparties, and they could all be uploaded in a single step. If required, we can also support functionality to allow for these counterparty details to be captured through the application screens themselves. We will now navigate to and select the file that we just looked at, which is the Excel file. We have set the message type also to counterparty versus invoice, which is another option, and we will select upload. This will now extract the details of this counterparty and push them into Customer Enterprise. Once we select the View Uploaded Files function, we can see that the file we have uploaded is waiting for process, which means that it is waiting to be picked up by a batch process in Eximbills Enterprise. So we will try to just refresh the function by clicking the function again, and yes, you can now see that it has actually been picked up by this batch process, and it says that file processing is completed. We can now go to the View Seller Buyer Relationship function, and we can see that the status has now updated to received SBR on this receivables discounting seller buyer relationship. Here we can see the details that were in the Excel file. These are all the exact same as the fields that we viewed. So now that we have added the counterparty and ensured that the seller buyer relationship is in place and is correct, we can proceed to upload the invoices and start off the receivables finance transaction flow. Here you can see the Excel file that contains the invoice data that we will upload. It is the same format that we used for payables finance. At the top there are details relating to the anchor or the main customer, and at the bottom is a hybrid of invoice data and counterparty details. You can see there are 4 invoices for 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 and 7,000 respectively, and you can see the due dates, the value dates, etc. We will now switch back to Customer Enterprise and we will upload this file, this time selecting invoice as the message type, once again navigating to the Excel file that contains the invoice data and selecting upload. The invoice data is now uploaded, and if we go to View Upload Files, we can see that it is waiting for process, which means it is waiting to be picked up by the batch process. And once we refresh it once again, we can see that it is now completed. So the batch process has ran, the invoice data is now uploaded. So at this point, we can now go to Invoice Maintenance, select View Invoices, and from here we can view the invoice data that we uploaded and verify that everything is correct by selecting View Invoice. Here we can see the invoices as we uploaded them for 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 and 7,000. If we select one of these invoices, we can expand on that and view additional details. We have now verified the invoice details, and seeing as when we filled out the sign agreement function in Eximbills Enterprise, we specified that there was buyer approval required for the invoices uploaded by the supplier, we will now just go to Eximbills Enterprise and enable CE access for the buyer through the amend SBR function. So we will just filter by SBR reference, select the correct SBR, and we will navigate down to the counterparty is a CE customer flag. We will switch this from no to yes. This will now provide access for Customer Enterprise to the counterparty being the buyer in this case of receivables finance. From Customer Enterprise, he will then be able to provide his approval on the invoices that have been uploaded by the supplier. So we will confirm this now. Now the buyer has access to Customer Enterprise, so we will sign into Customer Enterprise as the buyer, aka the counterparty. Once we have signed in, there are a number of functions that we have access to. The first thing we will look at is viewing the SBR, or the seller-buyer relationship. Once we have selected this function, we can select the relevant SBR, select View, and now we can see all of the details about the SBR between the anchor customer, the supplier, and the buyer, in this case as the counterparty. We can also then go and view any invoices related to this SBR. So here are the invoices that we uploaded as the supplier for 3,000, 5,000, 6,000 and 7,000. And once we have viewed the invoices, we can also go and approve these invoices so that the supplier can request for financing on these invoices. So here are the invoice details that we uploaded and that are now waiting approval. We can select all and then select confirm. Once we complete this, that means that the invoices can then be requested by the supplier for financing. So now, having logged out as the buyer, we will re-log into CE, this time as the supplier or the main customer or anchor party. Once we have signed in, we will then be able to initiate a finance request through a dedicated function and then view the available invoices for financing. Here we can see the invoice details yet again, and we can see that the total invoice amount was 21,000, but the financed amount will be 16,800. So the supplier's finance request has now been processed. We will switch back over to Eximbills Enterprise, where we will process this financing request and subsequently do the manual financing of these invoices. Of course, this process can be automated as you have seen earlier, but for now we will process it manually so that you can see all of the transaction screen. So here are the details relating to the finance request. We will set the interest charge type to upfront. And now we'll move on to the invoice details. By selecting Get Data, it will retrieve all of the details relating to each individual invoice. And by selecting Finance, it will then do all of the calculations based on interest rates, fees, charges, the invoice financing percentage, etc. Moving on now to handling the actual debits and credits that are required to finance this transaction. You will see that there are tabs dedicated for multi-debit and multi-credit, where we will specify the accounts to be debited and credited here. So once all of these details have been completed, we can then go back to the main tab, verify all of the details that we have inputted and the ones that we have populated previously. And if we like, we can also go and view the vouchers associated with this transaction as well, so the accounting entries. Here we can see those. We can see the debits and the associated credits, and we can now confirm this transaction. So the financing has now been executed by the bank, so we can log back into Customer Enterprise as the supplier. So we can now go ahead and verify the status of the invoices by selecting the View Invoices function. Then we will select the invoices under Receivables Discounting, and we can now see the status of the individual invoices is financed. And if we like, we can also go and view additional detail about the financing using the View Finance function. Select one of the invoices, and now we can see further detail about the actual financing, such as the interest rates, the value dates, etc. So now we just have one remaining step to perform, and that is to go and settle the invoices over in Eximbills Enterprise, acting as the bank. So we will again filter by SBR reference, select the correct SBR. Here we can see all of the details to do with the invoice, to do with the payment, and there are numerous tabs on the left hand side. Once again, using Get Data, we can retrieve all of the information to do with each invoice. This is the payment information tab. Then similarly to the financing function, we have multi-debit and multi-credit tabs where we can specify the debits and credits that are required here to settle this transaction. So once we have completed processing these, we can once again verify the details. We can view the accounting entries, the vouchers, and verify everything is correct. We can then close this and go ahead and confirm this transaction. Copy the reference number first. Now that is completed. We can go now and verify from Eximbills Enterprise that this is settled correctly by inquiring the invoices yet again and filtering by SBR, selecting the correct SBR, and now we can see that the invoice status for each is refunded, which means settled in Receivables Discounting. We can again see further detail. We can see the invoice financing details. We can see the invoice payment details additionally. Now we can also switch back over to Customer Enterprise and log in as the supplier and show you how from their perspective they can verify that the invoices have been settled. Once again, we will use the View Invoice function, select an invoice, and we can see the status again is refunded, which means settled in Receivables Discounting or Receivables Financing. We can also navigate down to the View Settlement function as well and see the settlement details. So select an invoice again, and here we can see a little bit more detail on the settlement itself. That now concludes the second part of this demonstration. And just to recap on what we have seen in the second part of this demonstration, we started off by adding an existing bank customer to a new receivables discounting agreement. We then acted as the supplier or the anchor customer or main customer and signed into Customer Enterprise, where we uploaded our counterparties. Once our counterparties were uploaded, we then proceeded to upload our invoices. Following that, we then assigned CE or Customer Enterprise access to the counterparty, being the buyer, who then logged into Customer Enterprise and approved these invoices. This enabled the supplier to then request finance for these invoices. We then went to Eximbills Enterprise and acted as the bank and financed the invoices, and then subsequently settled these invoices manually as well. That will conclude today's demonstration. Thank you very much for your time.